Welcome to the Macmillan Report. I'm Marilyn Wilkes, your host, and our guest is John Merriman, Charles Seymour Professor of History at Yale University. He specializes in modern France, urban and social history, and modern European history since the Renaissance. He has written numerous books, including The Red City, Limoges, and the French 19th Century, Margins of City Life, Explorations on the French Urban Frontier, and Dynamite Club, How a Café Bombing Ignited the Age of Modern Terror. Today we talk with Professor Merriman about his new book on the Paris Commune of 1871, particularly on Bloody Week. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, Marilyn. Nice to be with you.
Let's begin with your book. Please give us an overview of it.
Well, there have been a lot of books written on the Paris Commune, and what I wanted to do is to write a book about Bloody Week that's kind of a narrative of massacre, which is the name of the book, The Life and Death of the Paris Commune, in which I follow various personages through Bloody Week, and before that too, and their lives and their deaths. It's my view that in many ways Bloody Week anticipated some of the demons of the 20th century, when you could be killed for just merely being who you were.
Wow.
In the case of the Armenian massacres, being Armenian, or in the case of being a Jew during World War II, being Jewish, or being a communist during World War II, or being an anti-Stalin communist in the time of the Gulag, and this anticipates lots of these horror shows. So I took a bunch of people that I found interesting, and as a way of packing, organizing, and telling the story.
Okay. What exactly is the Paris Commune for those of us who aren't
Well, the
familiar
Paris
with
Commune was, the French got themselves in a foolish war in 1870 against Prussia and their South German allies, and got blown out in a matter of weeks. But Paris found itself besieged, and during that siege, there was a movement on the left, particularly in the more proletarian parts of Paris, for a commune, that is an independent municipal authority that would continue the war and that would eventually enact progressive reforms. So after France loses, and they lose all of Alsace, which was the second most industrial region in France, and part of Lorraine, albeit they were vastly more German-speaking than French-speaking, there is an insurrection in Paris because of a conservative provisional government. Ordinary Parisians on Montmartre, in the 18th arrondissement, and in Belleville in the 20th, prevent troops from the provisional government from taking their cannons, the cannons of the National Guard during the siege, and they hold power for 62 days. When Paris was free, there's lots of contradictions, lots of disputes, lots of debates, but Paris is besieged again, and in the end they get massacred. Some were executions, some were minimum of 10, 12,000 people, a maximum of 20,000 people get slaughtered. Wow. And you were guilty for being, one of the prosecutors, military prosecutors said, à Paris tout le monde était coupable, that you were guilty if you're a Parisian that is not wealthy enough to get out, and if you had an affinity for the Paris Commune, and certainly if you fought for the Paris Commune. So certainly, I follow these people through.
Scary time to be in Paris.
Exhilarating time also, but at the end, if you go to Père Lachaise Cemetery and you realize they were fighting, in the last-ditch struggle in May 26th, 27th, 28th, at the very end in Père Lachaise Cemetery, among the tombs, and you see the wall of the Fédérés where a lot of them were shot and their bodies thrown into common graves. It's a sort of exhilarating time when Paris was free. Voilà.
So, Bloody Week, give us an idea of what that entails.
Well, Bloody Week was the troops of the Versailles government, which was appropriately enough housed at Versailles, in the Chateau of Versailles, enter the western ramparts of Paris on the 21st of May, which was a Sunday, and they fight their way rather rapidly through inadequate defenses, through and around barricades that were put up by ordinary men, women, and children, blocking off smaller streets. There was an enormous one on the Place de la Concorde as well, and the Bloody Week was the was the end of the Paris Commune. The Communards execute some hostages that they'd taken because the Versaillais were the Versailles troops were executing captured Communards, and some of them, including the Archbishop of Paris, were executed. But in the end, the Communards and people in the Commune killed about 64 people, and the Versailles troops, which is regrettable, the Versailles troops killed thousands and thousands and thousands, and covered their bodies with lime, and
Wow.
or carted them outside of Paris, or threw them in the river, and the gutters of Paris ran red with blood. So it was a terrible time.
So, give me an idea in terms of the numbers of the troops versus the numbers of the people in the Commune.
Very good question. Thiers, who was the head of the provisional government, Adolphe Thiers, he built up the army, which had been defeated by the Prussians, so we had about 130,000 troops. The Communards, in principle, that is the people in the Commune, had 250,000 National Guardsmen, but they really didn't. In the end, number 20, 30, maybe 40,000 National Guardsmen fought, and they tended to fall back on their own neighborhoods. And the planning of the defense was very chaotic. So what I do in this book is I take various people, as I said earlier, and follow their lives. And one of them is this Archbishop dude, Georges d'Arbois, who's from the Haute-Marne in the east of France. And he was not an unsympathetic character. He wasn't what we'd say in French, rigolo. He wasn't a barrel of laughs, but he had taken on the Vatican on various things and actually cared about ordinary people. And in the end, he gets it. He's executed on the 24th of May. So I follow him through a little bit about his earlier life and then his death. And ironically, now I keep getting invited to the Haute-Marne to give talks because they think I'm one of them. In fact, I gave a talk there recently in Failly-Billot, which is where he was born in the Haute-Marne. And I would find myself, everybody else all dressed up except for me as usual, and I found myself giving my talk about the Paris Commune between a bust of Georges d'Arbois and his actual cassock that they somehow had found and brought and put next to me. But he's somebody that, in the end I admire, and so he's one of the people. And then I took a guy on the Versailles side who wrote his memoirs about killing, and he's in there too. And there's a real left-wing guy called Raoul Rigaud, who was kind of a salaud, kind of a bastard, not because he was left-wing, but he was kind of a bit crazy. He's what you used to call a blanquiste, kind of a proto-Lenin type, actually, in a curious way. So I follow him around, and he gets his. He's killed on the 24th also. And then a woman called Nathalie Lemel, who was a proletarian married to an alcoholic from Brittany, and she's a pretty good egg, so I follow her along. And Louise Michel, who's sort of an edible character in this, who's really kind of grim. They called her the Red Virgin, school teacher, but of very good socialist politics from the point of view of the Communards. So I follow her around. Also, inevitably, Gustave Courbet, the painter, the naturalist, because he becomes an important personage in the Paris Commune, and a bunch of other people. So it's a hard one to write about, and because of the way books are these days, I had to cut all sorts of pages out. My God, because publishers are convinced that people won't buy a book more than 288 pages, and they want to get their money back. So the first manuscript was 1,150 pages.
Oh my goodness!
Because that's how I work, and in the end, now it's about 500 manuscript pages, so I cut more than half of it out.
All right, so I am curious in terms of how you did the research for the book and how you picked the characters. Is there a plethora of people that you could have picked?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay, so give us some rationale as to
no,
why
absolutely.
you picked who
First
you
of all, the
picked
research.
and how you did follow them around.
Sure.
What does that mean?
Well, to follow them around is that, the Commune has got a vast amount of secondary literature, but the more thing about the Commune is that you got the archives now it's called the Archives de la Défense, where I've spent many moons at Vincennes, and so you can follow them in dossier there, and you've got a whole host of memoir literature, and you've got dossier on the Archbishop in the Archives Nationales, and so basically my last book was published in 2009, and I got interested in this because the father of the last guy, Émile Henry, whose short life I wrote about last time, was in the Commune, and he saw state terror up close. And so that got me interested in this topic. And of course, one of the central themes is state terror and the emergence of strongly national and potentially terrorist states is a theme of the 19th century. And so, because I've written a lot about Paris, most of my work is in the provinces, a lot of it, but I've got a lot of books on Paris. I'm interested in the spatial dynamics or concomitants of of class and politics. And so lots of my book is about the northeastern part of Paris, Montmartre and well, Batignolles, which is more in the northwest, but and Belleville and Menilmontant and places like that. People's Paris. You got the dichotomy between more prosperous east and the poor, a more prosperous west and the poorer east, as you have in London, you have in Vienna, and lots of other places. But I've always been interested in why European and French suburbs in particular are just the opposite, the mirror image of American suburbs, where the unwanted other is in the center city. And in France, it's just the opposite. The unwanted other is perched on the margins of city life. And so that got me interested in following these people around and the dynamics of class and of contention in a very bloody time. And the nice thing about working on something like the Paris Commune is the role of photography. I mean, you know, I've written a lot about all sorts of things, but we have to guess what Robespierre looked like, or we have to guess what Louis XVI looked like, or the 14th, or the 13th, or the 12th, or a whole bunch of them. But for the first time in 1837, you can see Paris in daguerreotype, and so we have so many rich images of Paris. They found in, well, the reason I decided to do this book one day when I was walking up Elm Street freezing by Trumbull College is that I'd just been to an exposition in Paris. We live in France, basically, but in the south. But I'd been up in Paris, where we still have a place, and they'd found, by miracle, about 10 years earlier, these photos taken by, just this doctor guy who lived in the West, and he photographed the siege and the Commune. And so we have these real images of life and death and what it was like. And when you're looking down from Montmartre and the cannons of Montmartre, I wanted to call the book The Cannons of Montmartre, but they didn't like that title. But anyway, Guns of August, Cannons of Montmartre, why not? But you can see, I mean, the spatial dynamics of Paris. It's all laid out below Montmartre.
Right, exactly.
And so it got me inspired to do this. And, writing about death isn't a barrel of laughs.
True.
But these were some pretty admirable people. And,
But it is interesting to be able to read their perspectives of what was going on. Did you actually find photographs of some of these people?
Oh, sure,
as well?
absolutely.
Yeah, so
yeah.
You knew what they looked
like.
Yeah,
I mean, we could find. I have the right to have 25 photos in it, and we have a great cover. It's Basic Books in New York and Yale University Press for the trade division in Britain and Australia and all those places. But the problem is just choosing between these just incredible photos. It's rich, it's fun. I don't like cutting books. I mean, I did the History of Modern Europe. I turned in 2,500 pages, and they said, you have to cut out 800. How are you going to do that? And I said,
and
I looked
you
at
did
them.
not learn from that experience.
I looked at them and I said, I'm going to cut out all the countries that begin with a B. Britain, Belarus, Belgium, and Bulgaria. And they looked at me like, this man is completely sanglé, he's completely crazy, but that's not how you cut things cut out. But you just try to tell a story that's analytical, but will appeal to a general reading audience, if that still exists, if there's such a thing, si ça existe encore. But no, it was a fun book to write, and I'm already beginning another one, so I'm working on it already.
Well, what about in the course of you working on this book, and how long did you work on it?
I spent 5 years on this book.
5 years, yeah. During the course of the 5 years, did you come across anything that really said, wow, that's shocking or surprising? Something I didn't expect?
Well, the degree of the hatred of ordinary people by social elites and by rural soldiers who'd been taught that the Parisians were the scum of the earth.
Wow.
And there's the intensity of the hatred of uppity, quote-unquote, women who were building barricades or caring for wounded soldiers. And I guess, you're not surprised in studying a topic in which it's a civil war, the degree of hatred. But I guess that was surprising. And also that having, I guess, gone to a Jesuit school, I was prepared not to be terribly sympathetic to this Archbishop dude, Georges d'Arbois, but because he was a Gallican, which meant he was for the rights of French bishops, and he did care about ordinary people, and he's somebody you wouldn't want to, hang out with. And he didn't like wine, if you can imagine that. He didn't like to eat very much, but he ended up being a very sympathetic character, and I had to cut lots about him because I was writing about all these disputes with the Vatican, and the publisher pointed out that people don't really care that much about all that. So I was surprised by that too. But it's Lots was not surprising, but they're just drama of life and death in the world's most beautiful city. And in post-Haussmann Paris, too, because the boulevards were built for three reasons in the 1850s and 60s. They were built to free the flow of capital and free the flow of air and have more sewers and that sort of thing. Bring in more light and air into the city of light. But they were also built so you couldn't build barricades across big boulevards. And so, that's another thing I pay attention to in the final days of this struggle. And I guess one of the challenges is that it's a book about people getting killed. So they're always lining people up against the wall if they're wearing military boots or if they have an accent from the faubourg. In France, we have different accents.
Right.
And if you had a real faubourg proletarian accent, you were toast. I mean, French toast, I guess, to make a terrible pun. But or if you were wearing part of a National Guard uniform, or called somebody citizen, or even tu instead of vous, up against the wall and this sort of thing. Right. So, I mean, I'm interested in these kinds of dynamics and in Paris and the way Paris works. So it's a lot of fun to work on, as the last one, Emile Henry was, and the next book is about a bunch of anarchists, also sort of Bonnie and Clyde before Bonnie and Clyde, and I'm already working on the way of that, and it involves the suburbs again, and all sorts of things that I like to write about. I have fun doing this stuff.
Okay, well, the book sounds fascinating.
Merci.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here today and
thank
sharing
you for
some
having
of your
me.
work. Sure.
Yeah.
For more information about Professor Merriman and his research, please visit our website at yale.edu/Macmillan Report. Be sure to join us again for another episode of the Macmillan Report, made possible through funding from the Whitney and Betty Macmillan Center for International and Area Studies at Yale.